Fake HOA cops arrested my son, then learned I'm the sheriff in this county. Why would a woman call the police on a 14-year-old boy saving animals in his front yard? That was the question that slammed into my chest the moment I saw my son in the back of a fake patrol car, red-eyed and trembling. He wasn't even old enough to drive, but someone thought he needed to be taught a lesson. That someone was Karen Mallory, self-proclaimed head of HOA security. The only problem? We didn't have a damn HOA. I'm Sheriff Lena Morales. I've worn this badge for 17 years. I've negotiated hostage situations, tracked human traffickers across state lines, and held mothers in my arms as their children slipped away. But nothing prepared me for the kind of brazen entitlement I was about to witness in my own neighborhood less than a mile from my ranch-style home, on a Sunday morning when all I wanted was to water the tomato plants. It started 3 weeks ago, when my son Diego decided to set up a small wildlife rescue table. Nothing fancy, just a fold-out table with a few hand-labeled containers, some baby possums, a few injured birds, one terrified turtle rescued from the highway shoulder. He put out a hand-painted sign that said, "Tiny Rescue. Be kind to all creatures." Neighbors loved it. Miss Fay brought over old blankets. Mr. Benson dropped off pet food every Tuesday. The local school even asked Diego to speak to the third graders about kindness to animals. But not everyone was happy. Karen, who lived 2 houses down, had a different idea of what community standards meant. On the second day of Diego's project, she marched up with a clipboard and an air of righteous fury. "This is unsanitary," she snapped, squinting down her nose at the turtle. "You can't just bring wild animals into the neighborhood. This violates HOA health codes." "We don't have an HOA," Diego replied, nervous but polite. "And these animals are all contained. I clean everything every day." "I am the HOA," she hissed. "I'll have this shut down." At the time, we laughed it off. Karen had a reputation mean to kids, loud at every neighborhood meeting, and convinced the squirrels were plotting against her bird feeder. But the threats escalated. Every day, she came by with a new excuse. Noise complaints, rodent risks, imaginary codes. Diego stayed respectful. He offered to move the stand closer to our driveway. He put up odor traps, even installed a cover tent to shield it from direct view. But Karen wasn't interested in compromise. And then came the day I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday. I was in uniform, but not on duty, about to head out for groceries when my phone buzzed. "Diego." But the call was cut off. Seconds later, a text came in from our elderly neighbor. They put Diego in the back of a patrol car. Some woman said she's HOA law enforcement. I dropped the eggs, bolted into the cruiser, and tore through the streets like a storm. When I arrived, the scene nearly broke me. Diego sat in the back of a black SUV with magnetic decals slapped on the side reading, "Community Enforcement Division." 2 men stood nearby wearing polo shirts with fake badges sewn on, clearly uncomfortable. And there, like a vulture circling a wounded calf, stood Karen. She was smiling. "What is this?" I demanded. Karen turned, arms crossed. "Finally, you really should control your child." He refused to comply with health code officers. We had no choice but to detain him for his safety and ours. I stepped forward. "That's my son. That's my property. And you're not law enforcement. Those men are impersonating officers. This is kidnapping." One of the fake enforcers blanched. "Ma'am, she told us this was HOA sanctioned. Do you know who I am?" I asked quietly, flipping my badge toward them. The look on Karen's face froze mid-smirk. "You can't be serious. I'm the elected sheriff of this county. And unless you want to be in a holding cell before sunset, I suggest you explain exactly what gave you the right to arrest a child." Then came the twist. From the corner, Miss Fay emerged, phone in hand. "I recorded everything," she said, voice shaking with anger. "She told them to rough him up a little, said the brat needed to be scared straight. I have it all." Suddenly, it wasn't just Karen's word against ours. I got Diego out of the SUV. He hugged me so hard I nearly collapsed. One of the fake cops sat down on the curb and began to cry. We thought this was a neighborhood program. She paid us in cash, said it was legal. But the damage was already done. The cages were overturned, some of the rescued animals missing or hurt. The tiny turtle was gone. Diego's tiny rescue sign was in pieces under Karen's foot. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. Karen wasn't just power-hungry, she'd been scamming neighbors for months, charging them fake fines, threatening elderly residents with citations for imaginary infractions, using fear and confusion to create her own little kingdom of control. And now, she was facing real charges. False imprisonment, impersonating law enforcement, destruction of property, animal cruelty. The evidence was overwhelming. Video, audio, witness testimony. Even her badge was a knockoff bought online. But what hurt most was Diego's silence. He stopped rescuing animals. For days, he didn't speak more than a few words. He wouldn't go outside. She made me feel like I was doing something wrong, he whispered once. That's when I knew it wasn't just about Karen. It was about every time we let people like her get away with bullying under the guise of order. Every time we excuse cruelty as discipline. Every time we're silent when the loudest voice is the wrong one. The law would handle Karen. But as his mother and as sheriff, I had something more to do. That night, as Diego lay curled up with his dog in his room, I stood out on the porch, staring at the busted remains of the tiny rescue stand. The wind kicked up an old blanket that had once lined a rabbit cage, now stained and torn. For the first time in years, I felt helpless. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A quiet knock on the door stirred me out of a restless sleep. It was Mr. Benson, the grumpy war vet who rarely spoke more than 2 words to anyone. He stood there holding a brand new foldable table, the kind with adjustable legs and locking sides. Behind him, Miss Fay, clutching a white cage with a rescued dove inside. Then the Thompsons arrived, and the Green family, and before long, half the neighborhood stood on my lawn, each with a contribution. Cages, supplies, snacks for Diego. We figured, Mr. Benson said, eyes on the ground. If Karen tore it down, we'll build it back up stronger. Diego, peeking through the window, saw it too. And for the first time since the arrest, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Hope. We rebuilt the rescue stand that day. Not in the corner of our yard, but right in the middle of the communal green space at the heart of the neighborhood, where everyone could see it, where no one could deny it. That afternoon, I got a call. The DA wanted to move fast. The charges were piling up against Karen. 5 neighbors had come forward with separate stories of intimidation, unauthorized fines, even threats of eviction. One woman, an immigrant single mom, tearfully admitted Karen told her she'd call IC if she didn't take down her laundry line. But the biggest twist was yet to come. As part of the investigation, our department traced the 2 men Karen had hired Community Enforcement Division. Turns out they were ex-security guards from a mall out of state, recruited via Facebook job listings. But what they revealed next made my stomach turn. Karen had forged official-looking permits, used county logos, signed documents in my name. When we searched her house, we found folders labeled with neighbors' names. Photos taken without consent. Notes like, "She parks wrong, leverage this," and "He owes back taxes, scare him." It was bigger than power tripping. It was surveillance, targeted harassment. And she'd been building this little empire under our noses for almost 2 years. At the station, when I confronted her face to face, Karen didn't flinch. "They were ruining the neighborhood," she said flatly. "That boy, he was attracting pests. Raccoons. You people think kindness fixes everything? This place needs control. Structure." I stared at her through the glass. "You arrested a child, Karen. You traumatized him. You manipulated people who trusted you. For what? So you could feel important." She leaned forward, eyes cold. "You think you're so righteous? At least I did something. I didn't just sit by and let it all fall apart." In that moment, something in her cracked, not from guilt, but from disbelief. She truly believed she was the hero. The trial date was set within a month. Karen pled not guilty on all charges, claimed everything was volunteer community enforcement. But the evidence said otherwise. And in the courtroom, Diego stood tall. He testified clearly, voice steady, described how she screamed at him, how she told the men to put him in cuffs, how he begged her not to let the birds out, and she smiled as she kicked the cage. When the video from Miss Faye played Karen's voice saying, "Let him cry. Maybe next time he'll think twice before playing vet," the jury looked visibly shaken. But then came a surprise witness I didn't expect. Jason Lowe, a former HOA president from a neighborhood Karen used to live in 3 years ago. He had flown in on his own dime. "I didn't want to get involved," he said, hands shaking. "But when I saw the story on the news, I knew it was her. She did the same thing to our community. We had to legally dissolve the HOA to get rid of her. She bullied the board into resigning one by one. I should have spoken up sooner." The courtroom went dead silent. Karen's face didn't move, but her lawyer leaned away like her defense just disintegrated. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on 5 counts of false imprisonment, impersonating law enforcement, fraud, harassment, and animal cruelty. Sentenced to 5 years minimum. Civil suits pending. But consequences didn't stop at the courthouse. The community groups she once chaired released statements disavowing her. Her face made headlines. Employers blacklisted her. Even her adult children stopped returning calls. I heard, through channels, she tried to sell her house, but no one would buy it. One neighbor spray-painted "No Queens Without Crowns" across her garage in red paint. I made sure it got cleaned up. We weren't like her. As for Diego, it wasn't an instant recovery, but it was a start. He gave his first speech a month later at a youth environmental forum. Talked about empathy, resilience, and standing up even when your voice shakes. "You don't have to be big to protect something small," he said. "You just have to care enough not to quit." There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Would you have stepped in earlier or doubted the warning signs like we all did? How do we tell the difference between order and obsession, between civic duty and personal vendetta? Tell us. What does justice mean to you? They say justice is a straight line. You follow the law, face the consequences, and move on. But justice isn't a line, it's a circle. And when people like Karen throw stones in the center, the ripples reach farther than we expect. 3 weeks after the trial, Diego and I were walking the perimeter of the community green when we saw something strange. A woman in a dark blazer and clipboard was standing near the rescue stand, scribbling notes. "Not again," Diego whispered, gripping my hand. I walked up calmly. "Can I help you?" She turned, startled but friendly. "Oh, Sheriff Morales, right? I'm Marla Jennings. I work for the state auditor's office. We've been getting complaints from several counties about unauthorized HOA operations, extortion, impersonation, even surveillance. Your case put us on a new trail." I raised an eyebrow. "You think there's more people like Karen?" She nodded gravely. "Not just more, possibly dozens. Copycats, groups communicating online, even former law enforcement selling their skills to these fake enforcement bodies." That twist hit me harder than I expected. Karen might have been the match, but the fire had already found dry grass. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Marla. We cross-referenced reports, pieced together names, and identified a pattern. Karen had been part of a private online forum called Order First, a quiet, hidden group where members shared tactics to take back control of their neighborhoods by force, if necessary. Fake fines, made-up bylaws, citizen patrols dressed like SWAT. Dozens of screenshots showed Karen mentoring newer members. She taught them how to print badges, what jargon to use, even how to manipulate fearful residents into compliance. One message stood out. "Fear isn't the enemy. It's the leash. You just have to hold it tighter than anyone else." KM. I sat in stunned silence when I read it. Karen hadn't just been a rogue neighbor, she was the architect of something bigger. And in a twisted way, she'd seen herself as a hero, a keeper of order in a world she believed was crumbling. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about one person anymore. It was about how systems, real or fake, can be twisted into weapons when no one checks the power behind them. We coordinated with other counties, Arrests followed. 3 more neighborhood enforcers in nearby towns were exposed. One had pepper sprayed a 10-year-old for littering near a park bench. But in our community, the wounds Karen left still lingered. One night, Diego came into the kitchen while I was grading paperwork. He was holding a small photo him and the turtle he'd rescued, back before it all went wrong. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" he asked softly. I put my pen down. "I don't know. But that doesn't mean you stop doing what's right." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. Then, almost shyly, he added, "I think I want to rebuild the rescue. Bigger. Like a real sanctuary. Maybe work with the wildlife center in town. Get a license." Tears welled in my eyes. "Then we'll make it happen. Together." And we did. With support from the local Humane Society, donations from people all across the state, and grants organized by a young activist group that heard Diego's story, the tiny rescue stand evolved. Within 2 months, we opened a community micro-sanctuary licensed, secure, and fully staffed by volunteers. Diego became a kind of symbol, not just for kids, but for the grown-ups too. A reminder that compassion isn't weakness, that order without empathy becomes cruelty, that we must stand up, even when the voice screaming against us wears a fake badge and a smile. But the story didn't end there. 2 months after her sentencing, I received a letter from Karen. It was handwritten, folded neatly, with shaky cursive on yellow paper. No return address, just a postmark from the state correctional facility. "Sheriff Morales, I don't expect you to forgive me. I still don't fully understand how everything turned into this. All I wanted was peace in the neighborhood. All I saw was chaos. People walking dogs off-leash. Loud music. Kids running wild. And your boy reminded me of my own son. But mine stopped talking to me years ago. Maybe I was trying to fix something I couldn't face. I was wrong. I see that now. I hope your son's doing well. He's braver than I ever was. Karen Mallory." I read it twice, 3 times. And though it didn't excuse her actions, not even close, something about it settled heavy in my chest. A woman so obsessed with control had lost control of everything that mattered. Not just the neighborhood, but herself. Still, I didn't respond. Some ghosts don't need to be invited back in. Instead, I framed the letter, hung it on the wall inside the sanctuary, right beneath Diego's original hand-painted sign, "Be kind to all creatures." Visitors ask about it sometimes. We tell them a short version of the story, not to shame, but to teach. Kindness isn't always soft. Sometimes it's fierce. Sometimes it means speaking up, standing firm, drawing hard lines around what's decent and what's dangerous. We tell them the truth, that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about healing what was broken. And sometimes that means starting with ourselves. Would you have accepted her letter? Could you forgive someone like Karen if they showed regret even after all the harm they caused? Let's talk about it. Where do you draw the line between accountability and redemption? Late October brought a shift in the air, that kind of crisp chill that reminds you time keeps moving, no matter how deep the scars. The sanctuary had grown not just in space but in soul. What started as a child's backyard dream had become a symbol. Schools visited. News crews returned. Even the mayor had come by quietly to say, "You did what we didn't. You made people care again." But in the quiet hours, when no one was around, I still found myself thinking about Karen. Not with hatred, not even pity, just awareness. She had exposed something fragile in our society, the terrifying ease with which authority could be faked, and the even more terrifying truth that people often obey out of fear, not trust. That's what haunted me the most. One Thursday morning, Diego ran up to me, breathless. "Mom, come quick." I followed him out to the front yard. There, on the edge of our lawn, was a small wooden sign, hand-carved, burned letters read, "No kindness goes unseen." At its base, a bundle of fresh flowers and a tiny envelope addressed in neat cursive, "For Diego." Inside, a note. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Karen made us afraid. But you showed us we're stronger when we stand together. Thank you for reminding us." A neighbor, Diego stood there quietly for a moment, holding the card. Then he looked up at me and whispered, "I want to write her back." I didn't ask who. I knew. That night, he sat at the kitchen table and wrote in pencil, slowly and carefully. "Dear Miss Karen, I don't know if you'll read this, but I want you to know something. The birds are okay. The turtle too. We named him Atlas because he carries the world on his back. I used to be scared of you, but now I'm not. You hurt me, but I learned something bigger. You can't stop kindness. You can try, but it always grows back. I hope one day you're not so angry anymore. Sincerely, Diego." He sealed it, then gave it to me. "You don't have to send it if you don't think it's right," he said softly. I held the envelope for a long time before finally placing it in my desk drawer. Maybe one day I would. Maybe one day she'd need to read it more than we needed to send it. Weeks passed. Life took on a rhythm again. Then came the final thread. I was reviewing zoning applications when a call came through. It was Marla Jennings again. "We finished the audit," she said. 37 individuals across 5 states. Most caught. A few still under investigation. "But there's something you should know." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" Karen's case. Your county was the first one that didn't just punish. It changed policy. HOA regulation statewide is being rewritten. Your sheriff's office just got approval to launch the first official neighborhood advocacy unit. Community-based. Education-focused. Prevention, not just reaction. I exhaled, surprised at the relief in my chest. So something good came out of it after all. She hesitated. "There's one more thing." A pause. "She's requested to enroll in restorative justice programming. Voluntarily." She listed your son's letter as her reason. I didn't know what to say. A flood of emotion, confusion, suspicion, but also something else. A weight lifting. A circle closing. That weekend, Diego and I visited the sanctuary again. A rescued fox had just been brought in, tail injured, eyes wide with fear. Diego crouched by the enclosure, whispered gently, waited. No sudden moves, just presence. I stood behind him, watching quietly. In that moment, I realized he had something I had spent my entire adult life chasing. A deep, unshakable belief that people and animals deserve a second chance. Even the ones who don't ask for it. Especially them. As the sun dipped low and bathed the sanctuary in gold, I looked out at what we had built. Not just a safe space for wounded creatures, but for wounded hearts. A reminder that the best justice doesn't end in punishment. It ends in understanding, change, growth. Karen would never be a hero in this story. She had caused too much pain. But her fall had forced us to face truths we'd long ignored. And in her wake, we had rebuilt something stronger. Not just fences and laws, but community. So what about you? If someone hurt your child, your home, your peace, and then showed regret, would you forgive them? Is there a line where redemption becomes impossible? Or is it us, the ones who choose what grows in the ashes, who decide what justice truly looks like? Share your thoughts. This story might be about one neighborhood, one kid, one Karen. But it speaks to something far bigger. And we want to hear from you.